Hello, and welcome back to this very special episode. Hopefully, it's timely for you because we are, at the time of recording, we are approaching the financial year end. And this episode is all about obtaining free money. Yes, that's right, free money. It's not often that you can say that, right? And we're all about trying to, make our sort of investing as efficient as possible. And what's better than free money to be able to do that and to build your financial security using compounded growth and the benefit of free money from the tax system. So we're going to explain how you can turn the tax system on its head today, and obtain that free money to enable you to invest in a far more efficient way. And I've got our investment coach, Peter Deane, with us, who has experience personally of taking advantage of these tax incentives and also advises our clients on how to do this in an efficient way.
Yep.
So welcome back, Peter. How are you doing?
Thank you, Manish. I'm good. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Very well. I'm excited about putting my own contributions in. I've done most of it for this year, but I've got a little
Yeah,
bit left,
yeah,
which this
yeah.
episode is fairly timely.
It's an absolute use it or lose it. And if there's one thing better than free money, it's free money from the government. So
Yeah.
who's going to say no to that?
Absolutely, absolutely. Well put. So today we're going to talk about how it works, what the allowances are. If you're listening to this before April the 5th, hopefully you've got time to act upon what we say today. Even if you're listening to this after April the 5th, it's not a big issue because we have another tax year that starts April the 5th. The only thing is you might lose some ability for the previous tax year, okay? Particularly with ISAs, because
Yeah,
ISAs are use it or lose it. With pensions, there is the ability to carry forward from
that's
previous
right.
years that you might not have used. Is that right, Peter? Yeah, you've got
Yeah, that's
3
right.
years
Yeah,
worth?
yeah. ISA is a single. Yeah, you have your ISA allowance every year, whereas pensions you can use 3 years worth of relief in any one go. 3 years worth of unused relief in any one go.
Exactly.
So yeah, we'll come on to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All of these are essentially free money. It's free money from
Exactly.
pension contributions, ISAs. ISAs are tax free forever. And then we're also going to touch upon capital gains tax allowances. And also, Peter, very importantly, Peter's going to sort of talk through the state pension that we're all entitled to. And there is a very important deadline coming up on that, so which you should all take action on. Peter will explain a little bit about that
Yep, we'll
in
do.
in a minute.
Yep.
So let me just start off talking a little bit about the concept of free money,
Yep.
because it sounds great, right? Who wouldn't want free money from the tax man? Who wouldn't want it? And some people might think it's far-fetched. It really isn't. It's as simple as it as can be. You make pension contributions and you essentially obtain free money through different ways, depending on whether you're working or whether you have a limited company, or you can claim it back on your year-end self-assessment. So let me just talk through a few projections, just how spectacularly enormous this benefit can be for you. Okay, so if I just share my slides, and if you're listening to this on a podcast, we'll provide some of these in the show notes for you. If you're watching this on video, then here you'll be able to see these. This is available as always on YouTube and on your favorite podcast platform too. The theme here really is free money from the taxman. That literally is what we are achieving here, right? So this is how it looks. Imagine you put in £20,000 into your pension. You could put in up to 60,000. The annual allowance is 60,000, and we'll talk you through the annual allowances for everything in a minute. But here's the concept. If you put in £20,000 into your pension in any particular year, the cost to you as a 40% taxpayer is only £12,000. Okay? That's £12,000 that you put in from your pocket, and you get £20,000 dropped into your pension. Okay? And that's £8,000 of free money every year from the taxman if you're a 40% taxpayer. If you're a 45% taxpayer, you get more. If you are a 20% taxpayer, or if you're doing this through your limited company, there's less, okay? But we're just using the example of a 40% taxpayer. Now, that's £8,000 free money being dropped into your pension. That doesn't come
Yeah,
out of your pocket, and you can do that every
yeah.
year. And so what we're doing is turning the tax system on its head. Peter?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And just think of that as a percentage. So instantly your contribution has grown 66% straight away.
Absolutely.
And that compounds year in, year out, as long as you keep making the contributions. So
exactly, as we'll see in a minute. So
significant.
yeah, it's a great point what Peter has just made, because yes, the taxman contributes 40% of the bigger amount, but exactly as Peter has said, if you're putting in £12,000, and if you're automatic, think of it like this way: you're putting in 12,000 and you're getting an instant return on your investment of 66%. What other investment can give you an instant return that much, right? So even if you think about it, you put that much money into your pension and put it into stocks, even if stocks were to decline the very next day by 66%, which they've never done, by the way, but if they did, you'd still be no worse off, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing. But here's where it gets better, right? We've just plotted a chart. If we do this every year, this kind of tells us how much we've invested, both ourselves and the government. Okay, so the blue line is how much we've invested. That's the 12,000 starting off. And then the government is putting in 8,000 every year. Now, that's assuming it's not been invested. Now, just look at the numbers when it is invested, right? The green bars show you the compounded growth of your investment, the government's free money, and the average market gains you get from stocks. Okay. And it's within 16 to 17 years, your £20,000 per annum or your £12,000 per annum becomes £1 million, just using tried and trusted methods and using the average return that stocks have given us. It's pretty amazing, isn't it, Peter?
Yeah, that's phenomenal in terms of the compounding effect of that growth aided by the government contribution. But I just want to add, if you're in a workplace pension, there's a third party here who's contributing as well. So if you're in a workplace pension where your employer is contributing, and to a certain level, most employers match, in fact, they have to, with auto enrollment, match the employee's contribution. For every £1 you put in, your employer is matching it with £1, and depending on if you're a higher rate taxpayer in that instance, there's another 40p going in. So £1 overnight becomes £2.40.
Yeah.
And look at the compounding effect of that as well.
Totally. So, and we haven't even accounted for that in these charts here, right?
No, not at all. No, this is just standard level of contributions, regardless of where they're coming from. But
yeah. So it's even more free money, right? So if you are an employee and if you're not maxing out the employer match, you really should do that. It really is a no-brainer, right? Because that's more free money from your employer, free money from the taxman, and the compounded growth will just be phenomenal, right? Yep. You'll reach 1 million in much less than these projections show in employer money. So that's make the most of that wherever and whenever you can. It really is a super attractive benefit, and you'll be thankful when it comes to retirement, because that amount of money is literally life-changing. And the other thing we'll talk about state pensions later, but your state pension can come on top of this, but that really this will be the primary driver of your financial future. We've touched upon pension allowances. So what are your pension allowances per annum? Okay, so you get up to £60,000 per annum, right? That you can contribute into your employer pension, your SIP, or your SAS, right? £60,000 per annum. You can carry forward up to 3 years worth. So in previous years, if you have underinvested, undercontributed, speak to your accountant, see if there is scope for you to carry forward from previous unused years and unused allowances. Okay, so you might find that instead of doing 60,000 this year, you could do in excess of 100,000, depending on how much you've contributed or not in previous years. What this also does is it could reduce your taxable income, right? So if you do what's called a salary sacrifice, if you're an employee, it could lower your tax rates, your marginal tax rates. You could find yourself being eligible for child benefit as well. So all of these things are super valuable benefits. Your personal contributions, as we've talked about earlier, you get income tax relief at your marginal rate, whether that's 20, 40, 45, whatever that is, you get income tax relief. Okay, 10K, e.g., 10K contribution costs you 6,000 with HMRC adding 4,000, right? The example before, a 20,000 contribution costs you 12,000 with HMRC
Yeah.
adding 8,000. So as a rule of thumb, for every £1,000 you put into your pension, HMRC will add your marginal tax rate worth.
That's right.
And if you max it out every year, if you're in a position to be able to max it out, if you put in £60,000 into your pension, and if you're a 40% taxpayer, it's only going to cost you £36,000 with HMRC adding £24,000, right? If you are a limited company owner, you can do this. You can make contributions from your limited company into your personal pension, into your director's pension, and then you get corporation tax relief. So whatever you put in, you'll save corporation tax on the amount you put in into your pension.
Yeah.
So these are the allowances. Peter, I don't know if you have
Yeah.
anything to add to that.
No, I mean, the only other thing I would add to it, and it's probably a little bit too detailed for to go into much detail here, is the fact that certainly with salary sacrifice, there's the opportunity to save on national insurance contributions as well. For where an employer is helping offers a salary sacrifice for employees for their pension, the employer saves on the NIC contributions that that amount going into the pension would have required.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so there's lots of opportunities here for the employer as well as employees to reduce their tax bill, increase their pension.
Absolutely. Yeah. Such a valuable benefit and on so many different levels.
Yeah.
So those are the pension allowances, but it's not just about pensions, right? And there are other tax benefits we can take advantage of. Another big one is your ISA, your annual ISA allowance. Now,
Yep.
a lot of people think that your ISA is just a cash ISA. Actually, most people in the UK have, if they're going to put money into an ISA, it typically tends to be a cash ISA. But you can also invest that money. You can have a stocks and shares ISA. There are lots of different types of ISAs. Now, talking of stocks and shares ISAs, we've got a lot of catching up to do in the UK because in the US, the equivalent of the ISA, something like 16 to 17% of individuals in the US contribute to their stocks and shares ISA equivalent. In the UK, we're only at 6%. And that's a bit of a shame because stocks and shares, give you much higher returns, have given you much higher returns than ordinary cash ISAs, right? So that's a bit of a shame, but we are catching up slowly, right? So here's just something that shows us that historically the black line here are cash ISAs. This is how much we in the UK are adding every year into our ISAs. And historically, cash ISAs have been the biggest contributor. We've been contributing the most into cash ISAs, whereas the blue line is the stocks and shares ISAs. So only recently, as you can see, the stocks and shares ISAs have overtaken cash ISAs. So we are playing some catch up, but we've got a fair bit to go. Okay. Now, ISAs are super, super beneficial for you as well. The allowances every year. You have different types of ISAs: cash ISA, stocks and shares ISA, IF ISA. And there's something called the LISA as well for under 40s. Now you have up to £20,000 per annum as adults, and you can contribute for your children under 18, and they have an allowance of £9,000 per annum. ISAs are tax-free forever, even at the point of withdrawing at the back end. When it comes to withdrawing, they are tax-free forever. Unlike pensions, you can withdraw your ISAs anytime. Whereas with pensions, there's a minimum age at which you can withdraw. Use it or lose it. Come April the 5th, that's your last day. If you're sitting there on April the 6th, you've just lost your previous year's allowance. So really try to make the most of this as you can. And if you've got surplus cash lying around that's already been taxed or it's just sitting there, it makes complete sense just to put it into an ISA. At least you'll save some tax on your interest. If you haven't filled your ISA allowance, it just makes complete sense to do that. Peter, I don't know if you've got anything else to add, the difference between ISA and pensions or anything else?
Yeah, only I do get asked quite frequently, should I invest in an ISA or should I invest in a pension? The reality is that you should do both and make maximum advantage of your tax reliefs. And ultimately, that will come down to a decision that you need to make around how far away are you from retirement? Have you put the maximum into your pension or not? Is there some room? How quickly do you want access to the cash? Because as we've seen with ISAs, you can get it pretty immediately, whereas pensions, it's locked up until your pension age that you can't access those, which in some cases is a good thing because it helps us to invest for the longer term because we can't get access to it. So we can't be tempted to access it quickly. So it depends, of course, a number of factors, but whichever you do something, so make as much use of the cash you've got, whether it's sacrificing it from your salary and going into your pension, or you've already been taxed on it and putting it into an ISA. And finally, the other point about ISAs is that it's great to see now that people are taking a longer term view with stocks and shares ISAs as opposed to cash ISAs. But the reality is you can have both. So that £20,000 per annum doesn't have to be in a single ISA. It can be spread across a number of different types of ISAs. So you can have a little portion allocated to cash for everyday needs and an appropriate portion allocated for longer term growth and compounding in stocks and shares.
Yeah, it's a very common question. Should I put money into an ISA or a pension? My starting point is always, as you've just said, Peter, is to try and do both where you can. They both have their own kind of different tax advantages, which are both really valuable, as you can see. So try and do both wherever possible, because these tax advantages, we have three leakages from our wealth, right? Fees, inflation, and taxes. Now, taxes are huge, as you can see in the first projection we made, the compounded benefits of receiving that tax back, so to speak. And the reverse is the case. If you're paying tax on your savings, if you're paying tax on your investments, that can very quickly negatively compound on your wealth. So avoid negative compounding and try and obtain the free cash, which will give you a huge, massive, free, positive compounding.
Yeah, absolutely. So maximize your free cash from the government and your employer if you're in a workplace pension as well.
Exactly. So the other thing we just wanted to touch upon is this is a relatively minor one these days because the allowances have been cut. So capital gains tax. Now, we do also have these allowances which also run until April the 5th every year. The allowance we have for capital gains taxes are £3,000 per annum. And so the rates reflect your basic and higher rates, okay? 18, 24%. And so whether you've made gains on stocks or property or any other asset, right? We have up to £3,000 per annum to enjoy those gains free of tax. And after that, you have to pay tax on. So sometimes it can be worth planning for this stuff, particularly if you've made losses in some investments. You can offset those losses versus gains. You can also if you made long-term gains, you can sell down parts of your investment to get up to the £3,000 per annum to use up your capital gains tax allowance over a period of time. So there's lots of planning you can do around this. Now, the other thing to mention is that Peter and I invest in options all the time, and options are a great way to earn recurring monthly income by renting out your shares. Now, HMRC recognizes options income not as income, but capital gains. So whenever you receive options income, this comes under CGT, right? So it falls under your £3,000 per annum allowance. So that's the other thing to note. And allowances can't be carried over into following years, but you can, if you've realized losses, they can offset realized gains, but they have to be claimed within 4 years. Okay, so that's another one, Peter, which I think it's important for people to know about. Not as attractive as your pension contributions and your ISAs, but
no, it's not. But nonetheless, if you're in the opportunity to make a gain, make it tax free if you can. So take advantage of it wherever you can. And the point about options is a really good one.
The only other thing which we wanted to mention today, finally, was the whole sort of issue about state pensions. Now, there's a very big deadline coming up, right, Peter?
Yeah, there is. It's a real deadline. This deadline does happen every year, end of tax year, but for this year, it's particularly important. Now, just to explain, the new state pension was introduced in 2006. Now, you are always allowed every year to go back around 6 years and make good national insurance contributions that you haven't made. So why wouldn't you make any national insurance contributions? Well, maybe you were not working for those years, or you were working abroad, or maybe you were on leave, or there could be a number of reasons. But what the government allows you to do, and you can find all of this information on gov.co.uk, but we'll include specific I refer to that help you in a detailed way. You can check your national insurance contributions record on the government website. So we'll include the exact URL for that. You can see if you've got any gaps, and then you can look to fill them. You can also check your state pension entitlement. Now, your state pension entitlement as of today, if you were to retire today, your full state pension entitlement would be around £220 a week, £221 exactly, or around £11,500 a year. Now, that's not going to be enough in most cases, I'd suggest, to live on, but it's a really helpful contribution to your overall retirement. £11,500 per individual. So for a couple, it's £23,000, and now it's becoming a little more of a meaningful number. And I think it's always helpful to contextualize this number. So if you try to think of the state pension as something equivalent to a defined benefit pension, which many of us may have heard before, which is guaranteed, inflation-proofed. So if you were to buy an annuity that enabled you to get a guaranteed £11,500 pension that had the triple lock, so increases with CPI or RPI, or whatever the rate of inflation is at the time, it's going to cost you in today's money around £300,000, around £300,000. That's the minimum, really. And that's not an unsubstantial amount of money. So think of it as a £300,000 lump sum contribution towards your overall pension pot. Mm. And why wouldn't you go for that? So you can find out lots of information on the Gov website. Now, the reason why it's so timely this year is that new state pension was introduced in 2006. And until the 5th of April this year, you can make good any years that you have gaps in.
Right.
Going back as far as 2006. Okay, that goes away the end of this tax year, and you can only make good 6 tax years going forwards. Okay, so you can make good all of those years that you have any gaps in between 2025 going back to 2006. So it's a really strong reason for you to look at, check your NIC record, check your state pension entitlement, make sure you're maximising state pension.
Yeah, that's super useful information, particularly now, and hopefully you're listening to this or watching this prior to April the 5th is the deadline, Peter, did you say?
April the 5th this year, yeah, end of tax year. Yeah.
Okay, fine. And so we'll drop all the sort of the links in the show notes and all the steps, right? You need to go.
Yeah, it's quite an easy process to go through. There's some great helplines there and information from the government. If you've got any particular questions, they'll be able to help you with this really quickly, really easily.
Yeah. And just to remind us, what's the sort of maximum number that we can get in your state pension?
So your state pension entitlement, a full state pension for a single person as of today is £11,500, around £221 a week. So if you go onto the government website and you can check your pension entitlement, it will tell you what your state pension. Yeah. You need to contribute around 35 years, so 35 years over the course of your working life. Mm. And as I say, normally you can buy back up to 6 if you're missing those, but there's a deadline now to buy back anything that you're missing until going back as far as 2006.
Yeah. Okay. So hopefully that will be super useful for people just to check where you're at. And if you're not there, you have the option of adding contributions to get you to the maximum level.
Buy those contributions through what's known as voluntary contributions. Yeah, exactly. You buy those years you're missing, and not known as voluntary.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much for highlighting that, Peter.
No problem.
Great. And so look, today was really about letting you guys know what's out there. And it's not as complicated as some people think. And really the idea of getting hold of that free money, everything we've talked about today is obtaining the free money or tax efficient contributions, really maxing out what you can get. It's not often that we can get free money from the government. So if you can do that combined with the incredible power of investing that money over a period of time for your financial future, it just ticks so many boxes, for us in a way that you wouldn't possibly be able to imagine. And you'll thank yourself, fast forward 10, 20, 30 years, you will really thank yourself that you took the opportunity to realize what's out there to secure yours and your family's financial future.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Good. Well, thanks again, Peter. It's not as sexy as stocks and options and ETFs and funds, but in many ways, it's even more powerful, right? To do this
Yeah,
stuff in combination
yeah,
with all of those investments.
absolutely. It's what gives it a little bit of a turbo boost in terms of performance through doing some good tax planning. As always with this sort of thing, if you've got any questions around your own individual circumstances, ask your accountant. They'll be able to help you.
Yeah, your accountant can be your friend in
Exactly.
these situations.
Exactly.
Great. So thanks again, Peter. I will see
You're
you
welcome.
next time.